faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. The Austrian writer Kafka has a novella called The Metamorphosis, which tells the story of an ordinary salesman. One morning, he wakes up to find himself transformed into a giant insect. Because of this, he can only lie at home, unable to work and earn money, leading his family to despise him and see him as a burden. Kafka tells the story to make us ponder, if a person becomes useless to others, do they even deserve to live in this world? Ultimately, when we talk about the meaning of life, what exactly are we discussing? In the 19th and 20th centuries, a major intellectual movement called Existentialism emerged in the West, dedicated to solving the problem of human existence's meaning. Why do we call it an intellectual movement? Because existentialism lacks a systematic doctrine or fixed boundaries, and thinkers labeled as existentialists have vastly different interpretations of it. For instance, the German philosopher Heidegger, whose work inspired existentialism, didn't even consider himself an existentialist. So while everyone hears the term existentialism often, what it actually means isn't very clear. Today, the book we're exploring is Irrational Man by the American scholar William Barrett. The goal of this book is to introduce the existentialist movement to the general public. Even though it was published in 1958, it has remained popular with readers. To this day, it's still a relatively excellent philosophy textbook. Why is the book titled Irrational Man? Please note, the author isn't saying existentialism encourages abandoning reason or that existentialists are mindless lunatics. Indeed, existentialist thinkers devoted much effort to critiquing rationality. This is because modern society prides itself on rationality and efficiency, but the cost is sacrificing individual uniqueness, making life feel like it's stamped from the same mold. And so, existentialists consistently focus on restoring the authentic and whole human being. In this book, the author introduces existentialism to us in two steps. First, to understand the background of existentialism's emergence. Second, to examine the key figures of existentialism and their respective views. In this book, the author introduces four existentialist masters: Søren Kierkegaard from Denmark, Nietzsche and Heidegger from Germany, and Sartre from France. Our interpretation will follow this approach, starting with the background. The existentialist movement emerged in the late 19th century and gained popularity in the 20th century, which has its modern context. In the modern world, thinkers observed a prominent phenomenon: human alienation, describing a psychological state. For example, we feel estranged from once familiar things. We mechanically perform tasks we have no desire to do. At worst, we feel like strangers to ourselves, not knowing who we truly are. Kafka's The Metamorphosis, turning a man into an insect, is an extreme yet vivid illustration of this. In summary, human alienation manifests in three aspects. First, alienation from the world. Second, alienation from society. Third, alienation from oneself. Let's discuss them in order. First, alienation from the world. The transition between old and new worlds left people feeling adrift, as if exiled from home. Traditional Western religion provided a complete worldview, offering systematic explanations from world's origin to individual life events. Within this value system, people knew their origins and destination as clearly as being at home. But since the 18th century, Enlightenment thinkers championed reason, dismissing religion as superstition and ignorance. Since then, religion ceased being life's centerpiece, requiring complete overhaul of worldviews and values. We'll use two examples to aid understanding. Worldview-wise, Christianity held humans created in God's image, held noble cosmic status with celestial bodies orbiting Earth, but science reveals an infinitely expanding universe. The universe endlessly expands, and Earth loses its central position. Human emergence in the cosmos is merely an accident. In the vast universe, Earth is an ordinary planet, and humans just a drop in the ocean. Value-wise, Christian tradition considered generating money from money wrong, forbidding wealth accumulation this way. But in modern society, The financial industry centered on lending activities forms the foundation of the entire economic system. Profiting through money lending has become perfectly reasonable, and one day I see red letter activism. What was wrong in ancient times is now right, creating immense value confusion. After discussing alienation from the world, the second type is alienation from society. That is, in modern society, especially when facing massive social institutions, people often feel like outsiders. Originally, from small farms to entire industries, unions were fundamentally composed of specific individuals. Without people, these organizations wouldn't exist. But modern economic life prioritizes rationality, organizing production around profit maximization. To improve efficiency, labor division emerged. People became institutional cogs, where identity matters less than task completion. For example, an auto assembly line worker may expertly assemble parts, but the factory doesn't care about his background or mood, nor does he understand why he assembles this way or care about his labor. The product he spends time creating ultimately doesn't belong to him. The worker labors, yet everything related to that labor is disconnected from him. The third alienation is from oneself. People forget their true selves. Industrial society mass produces goods through standardization and even tries to mass produce lives, making people care more about trends than asking, "Who am I?" That question becomes irrelevant. What everyone eats, watches, or where they vacation becomes paramount. Thus, living as someone else becomes modern people's life goal. One day, when confronting themselves, they'll feel like complete strangers. All right, let's summarize existentialism's emergence background. The author argues modern humans experience threefold alienation. Estrangement from world, society, and self, forming existentialism's backdrop. Existentialism's mission is thus to overcome alienation and restore authentic selves. As we just discussed, existentialism is a rather loose intellectual movement without a singular central figure. Considering this, the author of Irrational Man focuses on four representative thinkers. Kierkegaard emphasizes religious experience, Nietzsche concerns self-transcendence, Heidegger contemplates being itself, and Sartre values human freedom. Next, we'll examine these four existentialist masters in turn. Kierkegaard was Danish, born in 1831 to a wealthy merchant family. He was sickly from childhood and died young at 42. Chronologically, he was contemporary with Denmark's fairy tale master Hans Christian Andersen, though his philosophical value wasn't recognized until the 20th century. Kierkegaard is considered existentialism's pioneer, who questioned reason while Europeans celebrated its omnipotence. He believed that only through religious experience can one perceive their true self. We can summarize Kierkegaard's existentialist thought with two key concepts. First, either or. Second, religious experience. All right, let's first examine the key concept. Either or. Meaning, a serious life involves constant choices. You must select yes or no, with no compromise possible. A significant event in Kierkegaard's life perfectly illustrates this either-or dilemma. At 28, after a 3-year engagement, Kierkegaard broke off his wedding. Marriage offered comfortable conformity. To Kierkegaard, this path was appealing. He even regretted abandoning the marriage long afterward. But conversely, marriage threatened to extinguish love's passion. Kierkegaard declared this an either-or situation permitting no compromise. Reason couldn't resolve it. Deeply loving his fiancée, he chose to preserve passion by renouncing marriage. Next, let's explore the second key concept, religious experience. Question reason, Kierkegaard sought models for authentic living in religion. He wasn't urging return to the past, but rather learning to engage with life as sincerely as believers do. Living in Kierkegaard's 19th century era, religious secularization was the dominant trend. For example, if you're a religious believer, you got to go to church every Sunday for worship. But that doesn't stop you from being a busy businessman, making money from Monday to Friday. From this angle, religion in modern society is like an overcoat. It can be separated from your personal life. You just need to live like a believer without actually living a believer's life. Kierkegaard strongly opposed this. He wrote tons of articles criticizing the Danish church because it made faith hypocritical and life insincere. Kierkegaard proposed that to rediscover yourself, you need a leap of faith to regain your individuality. In the Bible, the story of Abraham sacrificing his son is a perfect example. Here's the story. God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son like a lamb to test his faith's strength. Ethically, Abraham couldn't do this, but since God demanded it, he had no choice. Faced with this impossible dilemma, Abraham was tormented by despair but chose to obey God's voice. Just as Abraham was about to stab his son, God stopped him, and Abraham passed the test. Kierkegaard really loved this story. The fear and despair Abraham faced in making that choice are the most authentic state of human existence. These emotions were solely his own. No one could decide for him or truly understand his pain. Abraham's faith in God wasn't from others' advice or learning doctrines. He lived it with his whole life. Kierkegaard saw Abraham as a model who shows how to live your true self in extreme choices. Now, let's sum up Kierkegaard's existentialism. Life's choices are always either or, and reason can't fix these conflicts. If we forget what true life looks like, we can find role models in religious experiences. In Abraham's story, he experienced fear and despair at a critical test, but it was exactly then that he truly knew what he wanted and lived his authentic self. Kierkegaard's philosophy has a strong religious flavor. Next, the master we're about to discuss has a completely different style. He believed that only by completely abandoning religion can one achieve spiritual transcendence and live authentically. This philosopher is Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, a German philosopher born in 1844, was precociously intelligent, fluent in ancient Greek and Latin, and became a professor at the University of Basel at just 24. But this academic genius had terrible health, plagued by illness since childhood. In his 30s, he resigned from the university due to health issues, traveled across Europe for recuperation, and started writing extensively. In 1900, as humanity entered the 20th century, Nietzsche, tormented by mental illness, finally passed away. To understand Nietzsche's version of existentialism, we can start with three key concepts: the death of God, the Übermensch, and the will to power. First, let's talk about the death of God. Nietzsche first proposed God is dead in his book The Gay Science. Nietzsche keenly realized that the hallmark of modern Western thought is religion fading out and reason stepping in. However, Nietzsche said this with mixed feelings. Christianity did suppress human nature and constrain individuality, but Nietzsche also worried that modern Westerners, having lost divine protection, began journeying alone, like a kid finally leaving parents to venture into an unknown world with an uncertain future. The death of God is both an opportunity and a crisis. Facing the historical fate of God's death, what should humanity do? This brings us to the second key concept. Man should become the Übermensch. When talking about Superman, we often think of Hollywood movie characters with physical abilities far beyond ordinary folks, running faster, jumping higher, and even having superpowers. Nietzsche's Übermensch, though, excels spiritually above the masses. What the Übermensch desires and chases must be genuinely their own, not just copying others because everyone's doing it. And the Übermensch is someone who creates their own values. Historical greats like Plato, Goethe, and Napoleon are what Nietzsche defined as Übermenschen. Because the Übermensch breaks through popular values, they're hard to understand by contemporaries. Becoming an Übermensch often means loneliness. So, what's the motivation for becoming an Übermensch? This brings us to Nietzsche's third concept, the will to power, which is a deep-seated desire for conquest rooted in human nature. The tremendous achievements of modern natural science are a massive release of this will to power. The British philosopher Bacon said, "Knowledge is power. Humans have conquered nature with wisdom, bringing about a comfortable and pleasant life. When thirsty, people just turn on the tap for water. When hungry, they don't need to farm. Money buys food. When bored, there are all sorts of entertainment shows to pass the time. But all this comfort makes people's spirits grow listless, losing the will to pursue power. Nietzsche advocated redirecting the will to power, not to conquer the external world, but to conquer oneself, stepping out of the comfort zone to become one's own master. Nietzsche has a famous saying, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," which perfectly describes this. The pursuit of power for spiritual growth isn't about enslaving others, but about conquering oneself to break free from conformity. This state is both lonely and painful, yet it's the necessary path to becoming the Übermensch. All right, let's summarize Nietzsche's existentialist thought. Nietzsche believed that modern people must accept the death of God when seeking life's meaning, and cannot revert to religious paths. Applying the will to power allows one to become their own master, transcend popular values, and ultimately achieve spiritual growth. Strictly speaking, Kierkegaard and Nietzsche in the 19th century are only precursors to existentialism, as their thinking hadn't touched the concept of existence. Delving deeper, the concept of existence in existentialism is the work of the German philosopher Heidegger. Martin Heidegger was one of the 20th century's most important philosophers, born in Germany in 1889, publishing his masterpiece, Being and Time, at age 36. And this book instantly established his position in the entire history of Western thought. The later existentialist movement was also deeply influenced by this book. Heidegger's works are notoriously difficult and obscure. Even Germans complain that translating his books into German is tough. But the themes he explores are actually the most relatable to everyone. He pointed out that people have forgotten what it means to live. In Heidegger's words, it is the forgetting of being. Heidegger's existentialist keyword is just one: human existence. First, to discuss life's meaning, Heidegger goes straight to the root by studying what being itself is. The term being sounds abstract, yet it's deeply connected to our daily lives. We usually say there is something, like there's a tree, there's a person, where there is means existence. Heidegger pointed out that Westerners have made a mistake for over 2 millennia, focusing more on the thing that is rather than the is itself, the so-called forgetting of being. That's exactly what this refers to. We can understand this through modern life. Modern people rush through life, cramming every task into their schedules. People's attention fixates on life's individual events, breaking existence into discrete tasks, like taking kids to school, clocking in at work, preparing dinner for family. People view these tasks no differently than looking at a table or refrigerator. These things seem external, separable from oneself. Over time, people forget what living means and become estranged from their own existence. Next, Heidegger reveals being through phenomenology. Simply put, phenomenology requires discarding biases and assumptions to confront things directly. For Heidegger, phenomenology studies human existence to dismantle Western traditions' understanding of humanity. The French philosopher Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," meaning existence comes from being a thinking thing. This reduces humans to rational beings, where only reasoning matters. Defining humans this way turns them into lonely thinking machines, rendering emotions and relationships superfluous. To illustrate, Descartes' rational human is like a walnut. Cracking the hard, useless shell reveals the kernel called reason. But Heidegger reset human understanding through phenomenology, declaring Descartes' interpretation incorrect. Humans should be beings in the world. What does that mean? So, let's use another analogy to explain. For Heidegger, humans are more like onions. An onion doesn't have a core. It's made up of layered skins, each indispensable to the whole. Human existence is similar. Reason is just one layer among relationships with others and connections to everything in the world. These all constitute human existence. There's no so-called rational core. Thus, Heidegger transformed our understanding. Human existence has three features: anxiety, understanding, and discourse. First, let's examine anxiety. Heidegger believed emotions are vital to existence. We are always in some emotional state, and anxiety reveals the self most profoundly. Thus, anxiety is a fundamental emotion, distinct from fear. When we experience fear, we're scared of something specific, like a snake. But in anxiety, we dread the nothingness brought by death. Others can help with life's tasks, but death is solely your own. You must die alone. Anxiety in facing death makes us discard trivialities and confront what we truly want. Heidegger called this being toward death. The second existential feature is understanding. Daily life involves interacting with the world, requiring constant understanding of things. But this understanding precedes rational thought. When riding a bike, we don't think about leg force, limb coordination, or physics. It's automatic. Once learned, we understand how to engage with the bike and ride naturally. Only when it breaks do we rationally analyze how to fix it. The final feature is discourse. Discourse isn't just written symbols or spoken words, but the context giving them meaning. We know the same. Silence speaks louder than words. This means silence itself can be discourse. It sometimes conveys far more than words ever could. A gesture, a glance, or the atmosphere of conversation. These are essential to human interaction, fundamentally more important than literal language. We'd call someone who can't read the room or speaks regardless of context self-absorbed, meaning they've severed connections with others, living in a false reality. Now, let's summarize Heidegger's thinking. Heidegger believed modern people focus only on concrete things while forgetting being itself. So he used phenomenology to reveal existence anew. To him, humans aren't merely rational beings. Emotions, understanding, and discourse are equally vital to existence. After Heidegger, we turn to existentialism's fourth figure, French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, born in 1905, the most influential 20th century French philosopher, writer, and public intellectual. When Sartre died in 1980, the entire nation mourned him. Intellectually, he continued the German existentialist tradition. Heidegger's masterpiece was Being and Time. Sartre's was Being and Nothingness. But Sartre added a French flavor. His philosophy emphasizes human freedom more strongly. We can summarize Sartre's existentialism as two core propositions. First, existence precedes essence. Second, existence is absurd. First, let's examine the proposition. Existence precedes essence. Western philosophy traditionally held that essence precedes existence. For example, a mammal's essence is defined by nursing young with milk, regardless of habitat or birth method. Without this essence, it ceases to be a mammal. Thus, essence dictates the purpose of its existence. Throughout history, despite varying views on human essence, once defined, humans are destined to fulfill specific roles. In ancient Greece, humans were seen as political animals, so life's goal was becoming a good citizen. In the Middle Ages, humans were considered made in God's image. Thus, human essence lay in divine likeness, making life's purpose serving God. In short, essence dictates life's purpose and gives meaning. But during World War II, witnessing the Holocaust in concentration camps made Sartre reject predetermined purpose or human essence. And, for example, when condemning camp executioners, we say, how could they do such things? Are they even human? Sadly, despite their atrocities, they remain human. Since humans can be extremely good or extremely evil, Sartre proposed his famous axiom: existence precedes essence. There's no deep refined nature. Before birth, nothing dictates who you become. You decide your meaning entirely. This infinite possibility is your birthright. Existence precedes essence. This proposition later became existentialism's defining slogan. Sartre's second proposition, existence is absurd. This follows existence preceding essence. Infinite freedom isn't comforting. It means no innate purpose. Ultimately, life has no inherent meaning. It's fundamentally void. Yet humans crave anchors in this void, seeking stability despite its futility. Thus, human existence seems laughably absurd, life meaningless, meaning-chasing equally ridiculous. But Sartre exposed this illusion not to surrender to meaninglessness. He believed life's weight must be given by our freedom. Sartre gave an example. During France's Nazi resistance, a student faced a dilemma. Join the fight for national duty? Enlisting would abandon his elderly mother. The youth asked Sartre, "What should I do?" Sartre replied, "There's no right answer. Choose authentically." But crucially, the youth must bear all consequences. Freedom's heavy burden. Okay, let's summarize Sartre's existentialism. Sartre elevates freedom sky high. He believes existence comes before essence. Humans have no innate mission. Life's got no built-in meaning. We're totally free to decide who we want to be. But folks chase meaning in a meaningless world, making our whole existence seem absurd. In absurd situations, life's meaning has to be created by yourself, and you gotta bravely shoulder the weight of free choices. Finally, let's review the whole book. The backdrop for existentialism is human alienation in a rational world. After humanity entered the modern era, worldviews and values changed big time. People feel like strangers in the world they once called home, as if kicked out of their own house. In modern society, folks either feel totally out of place or just follow the crowd, not knowing what they really want out of life. Living in this context, the existentialist movement popped up, focusing on the meaning of human existence. 19th century Kierkegaard and Nietzsche were existentialism's pioneers. Kierkegaard pushed for either or life choices, hoping people'd find their true selves through religious experiences. Nietzsche declared God is dead, stressing self-transcendence, giving your own life meaning to become the Übermensch. 20th century Heidegger and Sartre are key figures. German philosopher Heidegger thought humanity had forgotten being, so he worked to reveal existence, highlighting how rich human life is. French philosopher Sartre, building on German existentialism, proposed existence precedes essence, emphasizing absolute freedom in human survival. Existentialism might look all over the place and clash with traditional philosophy's neatness, but existentialists all aim to restore the full human image. Humanizing fearful of thinking computers, anxiety, fear, and our limits are unavoidable parts of being alive. Nurtured by existentialism, Western culture saw another breakthrough after World War II. Stuff like French feminism, absurd literature, new wave cinema, Anglo-American existential therapy, and continental psychoanalysis, all these are existentialism's intellectual offspring. By confronting human existence head-on, bringing real people into philosophy, and pondering the existentialist movement, it became an inescapable milestone in Western thought. Even today, when Westerners ponder life and death's big questions, existentialism remains their spiritual compass. Irrational man. That concludes our interpretation of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next episode.